Friends and family, welcome to the Regeneration Podcast. Brother Michael Martin, what's going down in the house? Oh, there it is.
Everything's going down in the house.
I'm just so guilty of not doing anything. I've twice at least formally I've promised people on the t-shirts gig, and it's really not undoable. It's just I got to get down to details. Go ahead. What's going on?
Well, I at least three people in my household had walking pneumonia this week, which was
You
not
mentioned
good.
that on Twitter. Yeah, not good
I
at all.
kept thinking I was going to have to take somebody to the hospital.
What's the basic symptoms? What were they dealing with? And is it
Super
viral?
horrible
Is it bacterial? What do we
congestion,
know about this thing?
horrible congestion, bad
Okay.
cough, and from what I understand, it's going on it's going on all over the country and it lasts for weeks.
I have heard about, yeah, doctors telling people what this thing is lasts for weeks. So that's
hmm
verifiable that like just doctors are saying that too. Say more.
Bonnie has been sick essentially since Christmas.
Hmm.
That's 2 months.
Too long.
She got a little bit better for a while there, but then she had a relapse and she hasn't really come out of it yet.
Mm.
And this has been about 3 weeks now.
Yeah.
So, but she's getting better, but slowly. My son and my daughter, they're 24 and 21. They're coming out of it. They're mostly out of it. They have a little residual cough left. But and of course, in the middle of that, our furnace goes out.
What was the history of your furnace? What do you heat with? Fuel
Well,
oil?
it's a propane furnace,
Okay.
and but it was old, and I knew it was old.
Hmm.
And we had this guy, actually a kid who used to play football with one of my kids. He came and he saw it was wrong, and he said, "Well, it's this blower motor, and the blower motor costs $1,400,
Oh
and
well.
it's on a 60-day back order.
Huh.
So, I mean, and then, but a new furnace was only a little over 4,000
Okay. Right.
installed.
You made the right
So,
decision.
yeah, I mean, but and thank God we had the money,
Uh-huh.
but it's been that kind of a month. It's
Yeah.
been crazy.
Yeah.
How about you?
Similar. It's a real winter. I would say too, it's not even to just find any reference to the health tie-in, but I just had a peculiar like 10 day of at any moment I could get some chills and feel some nausea. And the 2 days it kind of kept me out of work because those periods would have happened when I was about to head into work. But I have seen a lot of that, and I saw a back and forth I think you had with our dear friend Tara. Who Tara, just let us know a week when you want
Yeah,
to come on. We'll get you
she
on.
had too.
Yeah, send me an email. But yeah, said the same thing. She's had it. And, do you think weakened immune systems based on the fact that, do you have a theory? I mean, weakened immune systems based on the fact that we haven't had too many real winters. I was talking to farmers this morning and at church, and they were saying, this is a good winter for farmers with that soil, a long time freeze.
Oh, yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
I have several theories.
Okay.
Uh, well, especially with Bonnie, because she had
Yeah.
endometrial cancer 4 years ago now, almost,
Mhm.
which just happened coincidentally to coincide with the release of the vaccines in spring of 2021. Um, now, so I think it's one of these.
Uh-huh.
That's what I think that what's going on right now.
Interesting.
Because a lot of this, what's going on right now, coincided with, I don't know if you remember, like back in, I think it was late November, early December, there
Uh-huh.
was this weird fog that was everywhere.
I do. But did they attribute it to is this the same thing as the wildfire for things in
No,
Canada?
no, it was
Then
just
I
some weird
don't remember it. I
fog.
don't remember it. What year was
Right?
it?
No, this year. It was this year.
Okay,
This
yeah.
it was last December and November. And
Okay.
there was
A
this weird
fog.
fog that it was every place. I mean, even it was in Europe, it was all
Uh-huh.
over our country. And but people coming up with this illness kind of coincided with it. I don't know what the connection is if there is one,
Yeah, yeah.
but it's certainly interesting. But on the other
Mhm.
hand, speaking of the
How
atmosphere,
are doctors treating this thing? So I don't know people are they saying take a course of antibiotics, or is it like if it's walking pneumonia, what's the stay
uh,
warm, drink plenty of fluids type of thing? Which
Bonnie refuses to go to a doctor.
okay, yeah.
So for obvious
I
reasons.
haven't heard. I think walking pneumonia is basically like treat yourself well, keep your fluid level high. Um,
And that's what.
I, I definitely had winters in high school where I just had bronchitis or whatever it was. It would just be a month of my life gone. But it does seem, I'll be honest, it does seem that it's more prevalent this year. This kind of like month long.
Yeah,
That's the only thing I can contribute to the conversation. I haven't thought
and
about
and
any
I do,
theories.
but I do think, for whatever the causes are, I think it is indicative of weakened immune systems across the board.
Mhm.
Whatever whatever the ultimate cause of it is,
It could
whether
be
it's
because for me, this isn't to like say none of this motivation comes from into bordering on people meeting in rooms. I'm very comfortable in that territory. But it would I what I'm seeing too is, just a corporate everybody's been so angry for so long. Everybody's been so anxious for so long. There's a corporate loss of Elan Vital, like that the life force. We we've been, you know, even if we took anybody who listens to this podcast could go, we'd all have varying opinions on what's controlled here or there. But I think, a useful term between right and left, or the well disposed of both right and left, is this idea emergency reocracy, right? That like 9/11, whatever, these big things. Like, can't we all agree that even if there was different etiologies, that it was harnessed, for just like a massive, massive loss of freedom. I was out hiking with my wife on Canisius Lake yesterday. Just it's cool, right? In the Northeast to walk across sunny day, frozen lakes, the ice fishermen, and there was a little nature library there, and one of those book giveaways. They weren't nature books, but my wife saw a good Ann Tyler novel, an Ann Patchett novel, and then I saw a Gore Vidal book and I picked it up. But it's just Gore Vidal, on 9/11, you know?
Hmm.
And again, just how it was hijacked, no matter what it was. And there's questions everywhere. But let's say I think everybody should be able to get together and say, gosh, it just really stinks that we downloaded like a massive, massive security state operation that's never been rescinded in any way. And the people who even opposed to rescind a little bit of it are deemed by the heads of both major parties as like, you know, jeopardizing our lives, that we've got to be enslaved for our own good. And I
Well,
just
yeah.
wonder, fine, but can anybody point us an end game out of this? And what does a world look like if we got out of this? Can we go back to something resembling a life, where people have some free time?
Well, that's
Yeah.
I've been thinking about that too,
Yeah.
and I think last time you and I talked, I don't even know if we even did a show about it, but
Mhm.
um, with all this stuff that's been disclosed by the Doge guys,
Yeah.
right, about all this grift and graft going on with American taxpayer money, fun, and I hope, who knows what's going to find out. I mean, which, I'm glad to hear about this, but I'm also pissed off that it was happening. Which, and the weird thing is, right, is
Mhm.
there's been, I mean, right now, as you probably heard there, we're probably as close to peace in Ukraine as we've been, right? And people are not happy about it.
That is funny to me. That is funny
The
to
people
me.
you would think that would be happy about it are not happy about it. Like
Yeah.
like my friend John Milbeck is not
Yeah.
happy, right?
Yeah.
And here's the thing. Now, I never thought I really
Body
understood that.
counts don't matter for people. When it comes to ideology, I remember giving a talk at SUNY Geneseo on like a Jordan Peterson phenomenon early on. There was young guys there. And I was kind of talking about neoconservative approach to life or a different form of life. And then we got into like Iraq and things like that. And it's just like nobody cares about the body counts of people dead. And that's why that tweet I shared with you from our friend Bill Kaufman, I won't go into it, but he's just like saying like Nagasaki is a different thing than mean tweets.
Yeah.
Mean tweets are maybe not an ideal way to conduct civil discourse, but like the bombing of Nagasaki or the Gulf of Tonkin or just outright lies and things. Nobody wants to talk about this stuff.
Or yeah, or the neocon, the whole
Sure.
neocon phenomenon, which
Yeah,
has
yeah, yeah.
migrated to it's a bipartisan effort now.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, so I never thought I understood the whole blue labor thing. Remember that with
Tell me more. or
That's
refresh my mind,
um
my memory.
Philip Blonde, I think, is there
Yeah, yeah,
about.
yeah. Our friend Elias was big behind that. He's a good
Yeah,
guy. It's not to jump on Elias.
but so they were all in, and Milbank was into it. Adrian Paps, I'm pretty sure, was into it.
It's kind of, it was
And
more Orban than Dorothy Day, right?
yeah, but what it was,
Yeah.
at least I'm trying to get my head around it. It seemed to be to me to be more of a desire for a coalition using the best of the right and the best of the left. That's what I thought it was.
Continue. Yeah,
Didn't you
uh-huh.
think, is that what your impression
I
was?
would have said, see, it's kind of like that's why I said like Orban. If we put it against a wider kind of like metaphysical understanding, remember when we had our friend Bill Kavanaugh on, this notion that happened in our time, and I would say in the last 15 years, and this is more for our listeners than for you, is that America bought into this notion of like the neutral public square. That there was this place where we dropped our different, and again, this whole hermeneutic is weird based on, the idea of religion, which we've discussed in many ways. But we just realized, all of a sudden, we realized that there was always an anthropology operative. There was always a metaphysics. When it came to the government, it wasn't neutral. We were
Yeah.
dots on an algorithm page, and we were consumers. And the anthropology was self-seeking individualism, which creates what it seeks to find. Guido Preparata's work has kind of exploded that, the anthropological unit. And we've created this beehive. And that Philip Blond and those people, they they were the early ones reacting to like what Richard John Neuhaus, corrupt in many ways, would call the neutral public square. They wanted to fill the vacuum there. They were coming alive, and Milbank was too. His book on social theory is genius. But like, do we enter that square that we thought was like a blank canvas where people just met and had pasta and talked over a small glass of wine and were friends? We found out that it had always been, for the most part, occupied territory, you know,
Hmm.
with this kind of competitive individualism. That Philip Blond to me was an early go round. I was somewhat interested in the phenomenon, but it seemed to have a love affair with power. That's why I say it's kind of Orban-esque.
Yeah, it had a lot of, which, I mean, I think practically speaking,
Mhm.
if you're gonna at least affect any change at the top levels like that, right?
Yeah, yeah,
You have to be involved with power somehow. You know
yeah.
what I mean? I mean, you can't avoid it.
I totally agree.
Um, Not that that's my preferred method, but that's how it is. So how do you
There
get?
are options, I think, to that, but go ahead. We'll get
Yeah,
it. We'll get
I
around
think
to
there
that.
are, but
Yeah.
but I think with that, I mean, how do you get people who are working toward the common good at the top, which we haven't had in a long time?
I think means and
Um,
ends thinking in our time. If you ask me to look at the gospel, and I've written about this at Front Porch, what's new about it? I mentioned I'm teaching this coastal, Catholic social thought thing um, at St. Bernard's Institute, a great place. The the idea of well, you say more. I kind of
well,
lost my train of thought.
well, I was thinking that, well, here's what I was thinking with
Yeah,
Milbank and the Blue Labor people, right?
sure.
And they're hypercritical of what Trump is doing right now.
Yeah.
But I don't get it because he seems to be doing all the kinds of things they wanted.
Right, 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 right. Yeah. And I get, so what I remember saying, I was saying
I
in the
get they don't like
gospel,
his personality.
yeah, but we could be entering into a time, that if you and I, if we're open to some of the themes, just a few of the themes of like this, whatever's going on now, I like the idea of green breaking through concrete, right? Bottom up, something that captures Ahriman versus Sophia. This idea of dandelions bursting through concrete. If that's true, one of the other things that's new about the gospel is we don't have to, it doesn't come across as fundamentalism to me, but it's a confusion of means and ends, right? It just seems if we were to take the freedom of this movement towards the gospel, that we kind of renounce. I'm reading Dorothy Day for this class right now, the same time this is going on.
Mhm.
And a big thing for me, I've given a disproportionate amount of my time this week to thinking about the USAID story as it pertains to not just the left in the church or with the country, but also to the right, the right. And this relationship that people, Christians of goodwill, people who belong to the church, this relationship with like power and means and ends thinking is really questionable, you know. And so Dorothy
Yeah.
Day, at the same time, you know, if we were looking, as Alistair McIntyre says, for a new and different Saint Benedict, the person most, I don't know who else anybody puts up there, but the people in my life who seem to understand the world, they would have said what Dorothy Day had started might be that thing, you know, that when, just to use Chesterton, at the decline of the Roman Empire, you know, what the Catholic Church started building the new in the shell of the old. You know, that's the song we sing. And I
Mhm.
think that like Patrick Deneen and those post-liberals and different ways of getting involved with confusing means and ends. And we're not, again, there's no purity test here, but I think we might be able to renounce those trappings of government. You know, we watched the show. Dorothy Day could watch the show and kind of root on. I like people seeing, you know, get their egg on their face. I think humor is part of this. We can like, this is a time not to, what we need more importantly than getting our thugs in there is to level the people who think they're better than others, to level the whole
Well, yeah.
structure a little bit. Yeah.
And that's what I've enjoyed about watching this whole thing unfold.
And yes, there's a huge element to that, Michael. I agree.
But I mean, the reason being is because, I mean, it was more than obvious. It was as clear as it's ever been over the last administration, the Biden administration, how little regard the people in power have for the common man.
Yeah, yes, 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 yes,
I
yes.
mean, zero regard. As
I
we saw.
told you Elon Musk tweeted about my hometown. We'll come to that. Elon Musk tweeted about Penfield, New York,
Yeah.
and it's exactly that phenomenon.
And we saw when the migration of wealth from the bottom to the top happened,
Yep, 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 yep.
right? And nobody cared that during COVID that businesses were closing and people were losing their jobs, and people still haven't come to terms with it to own their complicity in that.
You're right.
It's mind blowing. It's
Mhm.
mind blowing to me how people still, well, we were just working with the best information we had at the time, and I was mean to people because I thought I should be, or
It
what
it
the
got
hell?
people like Noam Chomsky to say like horrible things.
Yeah,
You know, it got
yeah.
a lot of
No,
interesting people
there's a
to
lot of
think
things I
like
agree with.
locking
A lot
people
of
up
slap
was
in the face.
a good idea.
Or
Yeah,
the Pope. Is he still alive, by the way?
he is. He
I
is.
check my phone to see if he's still alive. Uh, but the Pope did it too.
Yep. And I want to go into all this stuff in different ways. It's not justifying. It's just to
But
say, like,
that's
again,
but
this
that's
USAID story is us, our dance with power. It's the same story, Michael.
yeah.
Pope Francis dances with power. Go ahead.
James Martin, who blocked me on Twitter, by the
Uh-huh.
way.
Okay.
Now he got all upset because when they paused all the grants and stuff,
Yeah. Yeah.
for USAID, and he was upset. Now he's upset about the poor people and stuff. Where was he? Why wasn't he upset about the 350,000 missing children?
Yeah.
I never heard
Yeah.
him say anything about that.
No, no, no.
That have obviously been trafficked, whether sex trafficked or other kinds of trafficking.
Hmm.
Where was the where? And that's you would think that's the
You're
Catholic
not
Church.
even talking about babies who were aborted. You're talking about children.
I'm children
Yeah.
coming
And there's a
across the
huge
border
silence on this
that they
stuff. There's a,
don't know where they
yep.
are.
Yep. Yep.
300, I think it's probably more than 350,000 now, but that's
Yep.
that's the number they were dropping.
Yep.
I never heard anybody in the the higher echelons of the church mention that at all.
Hmm.
And in fact, what did they do instead? The U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops sues the Trump administration.
Yeah. That's a bad look, isn't it?
Oh, it's
I mean,
horrific.
talk, yeah, 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 yeah. What do Catholic young men think when they see the headline, you know, Catholic bishops sue the Trump administration? You know, people who, you know, this country that, you know, right or wrong, they knew there was no jobs for them. They were looked down upon because of the, you know, all possibilities were kind of removed from them. Go
Hello,
ahead.
Guido. Is that you?
No, that guy, he's a man of the hour right now. You know.
Oh,
Uh-huh.
yeah. Like I keep saying, we got to talk to Guido about this.
Yeah, I think it's next week. He might bring
Yeah.
his friend Jason Horsley on too, who's quite something.
Oh my
Um, but the
God.
but you know that's a nuanced story. You know, for me, I can start to say this clearly is well, and I don't know if it's right, but I can put, you know, theories are verifiable. Um, you know, these are epical things we're going on, and that
Absolutely.
humor and peace and goodwill,
Hmm.
these things are in, you know, they're going to be needed. So, you know, my thing in Penfield, Michael, was uh when things get close to home, it starts to get real. But like one of the themes that I'm seeing this week is that things at the microcosmic level and things at the macrocosmic level are outing themselves, and they're not easily healed. Like in the Catholic Church, it's marriage with kind of U.S. money of geopolitics. And again, it implicated for our listeners in Guido's book, New Directions in Catholic Social and Political Thought. There's a chapter in there by a priest who's an Opus Dei. He's at Harvard, but he's Opus Dei, so he can't be seen as like a Jim Martin. But what you say about Jim Martin is right. But it's about the neoconservative takeover of the first things, and this has been on both sides.
Mhm.
And I believe when the conclave happens, and I've got a lot of great things to say about Pope Francis, but when the conclave happens, and I'm not even saying he doesn't come out of this illness, and I pray for him, and our bishop prays for him, is that the issue people are going to be talking about. Pope Francis is elected. He's got a lot of people in his college of cardinals. And even as I speak here, I hope people don't see it as partisan. But that would have been kind of seen a lot of those people a little bit left or right. But when it comes to the weddedness of like the whole Vatican to U.S. finance and so forth since World War II. We could talk about this guy, Mike Benz, who's very trendy online. I think he's sus beyond critical mass. But Mike Benz says the basic story that Guido can tell next week, which is right after World War II in Italy. Let's say everything was noble about the U.S. government until then. It wasn't, friends. It wasn't. But they were having elections, but they knew that the country of Italy was going to vote in communists. And an otherwise pretty good guy, George Kennan, and this is from Mike Benz, we just know it to be true, later said it was the worst decision he ever made. But the basic idea was this can't happen. In free elections, it can't go here, which is always the problem with free elections, like the Trump thing. All of a sudden you get what you don't. But he said essentially to the U.S. government, take over the institutions, take over the printing presses, take over the houses of worship, take over the church and their periodicals. And the
Right.
American government learned a lot of tricks that it never, ever put down. And that's,
I sincerely hope that they clean that out. And
and I think the African
we're just
bishops,
surprised at
yeah,
how hard Trump hit cleaning the deep state out when he first hit
yeah.
the
And we could say, is he motivated by altruism or all these people were trying so hard to ruin him? Either way, he came in, it seems now, I think we can say he came in with a plan, and it was like a blitzkrieg or something.
well thought out plan, by the way.
Yeah.
And
Guess I
I
do
mean,
buy that.
and the thing is, yes, they were certainly trying to take him out, but that's the whole thing. They were trying to take him out.
I think so too.
They were like they installed Zelensky in Ukraine. They were trying to install their own person in the U.S.
Mhm.
Right? They were meddling in U.S. elections,
Mhm.
and I'm certain that they were behind the assassination attempts.
Yeah, I don't know that, but I
It
know,
took a lot
I
of
think,
money
yeah.
to make me change my mind about that.
Yeah. I just
Uh,
think like, so it's one of these things like, let's say, I always think of Chesterton. So, rhinoceroses, unicorns don't exist, but look at rhinoceroses. But like, I like this part. It doesn't mean you keep saying what you're saying, but I like these things where we can direct people to just simple ones like MK Ultra and Operation Northwoods. And then I don't
well,
know
yeah,
everything that went down at Waco, but like it makes a whole other world open. And to your point, there was, I say to anybody now, we can look at the Hunter Biden laptop story that anybody should admit that like those people, if Trump's going after the FBI, it's because like 26 guys under people who now are trusted reporters for like CNN and MSNBC said that this was not Hunter Biden's laptop when in
it
fact
was
it was.
51. It was
51.
51
Okay, fair. Yep,
agency
yep.
people. I
This
mean, top
definitely
level
happened.
people.
This definitely happened. This
And it
definitely
definitely happened. And if I were to take over, if I were to be president, and after that kind of stuff, I would clean house too.
You
I would
might
have
have
mass
to. Yep,
firings
yep.
because because it's not just about the president. It's about the people you're supposed to protect and serve,
Mhm.
right? And obviously, those people have not been protected or served for a
Mhm.
good long while.
Yeah.
In fact,
Where do you think the Elon Musk thing is going? I mean, this is a fly in the ointment. I
it's
mean, some of
interesting. I
it's
mean,
good. Yeah.
I don't
Somebody I
know if
really
they're going
admire
to
say
sell
he's
that.
very gifted at breaking things down and building them up again. So it's not all in one sense. If we get into the nitty gritty, you can be sane and look at his record, and he knows how. We might not agree with the way he did it, but he broke down Twitter and he built it back up again.
Yeah.
But I'm probably
And he
letting
made
our
it a
listeners
leaner,
know,
meaner machine too, right?
yep, Yep.
We did.
And I'm not so sure again, but like this idea, let's use this a closer example to home, and we haven't talked about this. Um, Productivity at work, wage labor. Um, so yeah, I guess I buy into it. Like neither of us are super proud that so many jobs, I think we both believe, in the federal system almost did next to nothing, maybe nothing at all. And a lot of people did very little. A lot of people probably worked really hard. That being the case, it seems to be the countervailing argument, to me analogous to the reaction against transgender being kind of a new form of masculinity that I find crazy. We look justifiably at that swamp, that mess, and see total laziness that probably, but in its place, I find that quite often I'm associated with, or that my side is with, almost like a dog eat dog world. Productivity is the goal, friends. Get in line, wear jeans, dress in an asexual way, get the nearest job you can, be thankful for what they give you, and be productive. Be productive.
Yeah, but I think it's not even about productivity, but just efficiency, you know?
That's also another one. It's a scary term, if you ask me. A scary term.
I mean,
We've
I
lost,
know.
the Catholic Church concedes too much, getting away from the idea of vocation, an idea that there's enough to go around, an idea of surplus, an idea of a peaceable kingdom.
Well,
Wendell Berry's still preaching a peaceable kingdom.
I don't know if you remember this, Mike, but when I was in school, like first or second grade,
Yeah.
so this is how old am I? It was probably 1969 or so, first or
Mhm.
second grade. And they were telling us then, boys and girls, because of computers and efficiency, when you're grown up, people will only have to work 3 days a week,
Yeah.
right? Which is
Yeah.
possible.
And we're already there. We're making more than they ever dreamed
But
of.
the thing is,
Yep. Yep.
that
Yep.
we could do that
Yep. We don't share.
easily. But
Yep.
that's
Yep.
not how
No.
the corporate model wants to work.
So how are you splitting these two narratives? In one sense, to keep alive the possibility that, like, efficiency for
Well,
what's the question?
I think,
Efficiency for what? Are we building a beehive to get to Mars? Are we? How do we get vocal about
well,
this?
I mean, I think people have I mean, throughout the history, people have had aspirations to go to the next thing, which I respect that. I'm not one of those people. In fact,
Yeah.
my son said, "Are you like Tony Stark?" I said, "I'm like the Tony Stark of poetry."
Yeah, that's the better one.
Yeah,
Dostoevsky, this
but
go
the-
inwards,
but
everybody go inwards.
but
It's less
I have
polluting.
no problem with Elon Musk being Elon Musk. Go
I know,
for
but how
it.
about just spoiling the planet with all this fuel oil in Cape Canaveral's waters? And it's not pretty.
I
It's
don't.
infantile. It looks like an adolescent penis. All those things is kind of true.
Yeah, I agree. I agree.
Yeah.
But
Faustian
I
culture is
can't. I
dying
don't
in
want
our
to control
time.
everybody's
Faustian,
behavior either, right?
no, agreed,
I don't want to
agreed.
tell everybody how to behave. I mean, let's have clean water, clean air, etc. I don't want to tell everybody how to behave. I would, I'm great supporter of Bobby Kennedy Jr. and his ideas about regenerative
Yeah,
agriculture,
yeah.
getting the money of big pharma out of the government and out of advertising.
Let's pray for
Those are
his
all good
success.
things because those things to a degree serve the common good, right? Just like creating jobs serves the common good. But then there's always it's you don't just do it for the sake of doing it, but people, I think especially men need to work.
Mhm.
You need to feel like you're doing something. Just there's something in that. But interestingly enough, um, and this is people have been complaining about this for years, but I've even 20 some years ago, 30 years ago, and I had a landscaping business, I was complaining about it, that that the young men I would hire didn't like to work. And I was
Mhm.
paying pretty
Right.
well, but
Mhm.
they couldn't last the whole day. I
Mhm.
had to go home. I'm too tired. I'm like, get out of here. So what am I? And
Yeah.
then here in Michigan, they made a rule that, like you say, you work at a restaurant and you don't show up for 3 days, they can't fire you. You don't, they can't, they make it so we have a business. We're trying to do stuff. He's supposed to come in. He just didn't call in. He didn't tell me he's sick. So you have these kind of two polarities. You have, um, the helicopter mom version.
Mhm.
You gotta leave Bobby alone. He wasn't feeling really up to it today. And then you
Right.
have the other side where it's like the Marines. We're gonna get to work, boys. You know, but so I don't know if I have an answer to that, but I do think, that I don't think work is a bad thing.
No,
I
no.
think work is a good. But
the
I
peaceable
don't think
kingdom answer is that
I don't
everybody
think
needs to take out the
bureaucracies are a
trash.
good thing.
No,
I don't think
no,
being part of the bureaucracy is working,
right.
you know.
I just wonder, like when we talk about doing something, when does when and how does the Dorothy Day voice to this get amplified? When and how does there's plenty enough to get along? Let's most of the thinking on the right, the reaction right now is still based on models of scarcity. Whereas Christian Catholics of any stripe or Christians, you know, when are we going to start working with a completely different way of looking at this? It's always seems to me, whether it was the old Democrat and Republicans or probably this new emerging thing, which has a lot of
Hmm.
newness. We both agree something's breaking, but it's the things they have in common which are more scary than the things they have in apart. And the Elon Musk symbol and so much of the other stuff is the real problem is like nobody's talking about this notion that there's plenty enough to get along or to get around, and or that there's like we'll look at education or medicine. When do we start really amplifying the destruction of the modern school system as it is? Because there's no way, we're training everybody, in a John Dewey-esque mode, um, which at its best, that era was ending in history, if we use Rudolf Steiner in any way. There's
Hmm.
obviously a different mode now where the individual Michael Martinness of each student is just needs to be the center of all educational endeavors and things like that.
Yeah, yeah.
When are we going to start talking this other way, like the 60s or something?
Well, I think we're in a transition period for
We
sure.
are, we are.
We'll see how it goes if they don't
Yeah.
kill Trump and everybody like him. Um, because but what I think's happening is that by and if that's what they're doing, I think it is by streamlining government,
Mhm.
by withdrawing America's tentacles into everybody else's business. Which I don't know if you caught a speech by Marco Rubio recently talking about. Now we live in a multipolar world now. This is not
Mhm.
American dominated, so we have to act like that. And
But there's
that's
a significant
why
number of very smart leftist journalists like Michael Tracy. But I want to say that's a very debatable question right now. Like this idea that we're multipolar. Some people are saying, oh no, not that um, this was all scripted, not all scripted. But I think Guido would very much come in here and say, no, no, no. Doesn't mean he's right. But like this is
um
containable. This
he
is a
might, but
containable.
I just to hear somebody in our government admit that. And
Sure.
the other thing is to pull all that. I mean, I really think we're looking at Europe.
Mhm.
And where Europe, they get to go to school for free and to college for free, and they don't have to pay for their own securities because the American taxpayer has been paying for their defense basically
Mhm.
for the last few generations, while we have astronomical college debt, etc.
Mhm.
Right? And so I think it's a good thing to downsize, which is what I think they're doing about it. And actually, what if you've been following John Michael Greer on Twitter?
He's been
But
great as always. He's just great. He's just great.
he has been, and talk about degrowth. So this is
Yeah.
the thing. I was saying we'll talk about blue labor, talk about degrowth, and it's an interesting kind of degrowth because it's a degrowth on the macro scale, on the global scale that they're talking about, which would make local growth stronger.
Yeah.
I think that's the idea,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? Now, I think it might take a while before. So right now, say go growth is like global, right? And then so they pull it in, it becomes more U.S. centric. But if they and it's not necessarily. And I think if you think you say the word degrowth, people think, oh, pretty soon we're going to be horse and buggy. Um, I don't think it's like that, but I think what happens it moves closer to the community. At least it could, in potential, it
I think you're
could
100% right.
move closer to a communitarian, or put it this way: I don't know if it would move closer to a communitarian way of thinking about things, but it would make a communitarian thing, a way of thinking about things, more possible,
Yes.
or
Yes.
a more distributed way, more possible. Because of, as we've mentioned many times before, yeah, you can talk with distributism all day, right? But you don't live in a system that is hospitable to that, so it's never going to completely work. The
Brilliant.
Amish are
Brilliant.
an example,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
but I think that's like that. hopefully that could happen.
I'm so glad you said that because you've heard me say like it's not between like John Milbank between Brexit and the European Union. It's degrowth. It's about Burgundy and Strasbourg, different regions where that's what every young person, if every young person, we know this is true. And we know that in one sense, I'm going to be bold and say like Jesus wants this. It's because what everybody's yearning for, right? Regional culture. That's why this microbrew phenomenon is both weird and a little bit toxic right now, but everybody loves this idea. Too bad we can't be more original than just like adding IPA with like one more teaspoon of cinnamon or something than the new local
Mhm.
brewery 5 feet away. But
But I think about
it's
when we were
beautiful. It's
kids, you
beautiful. Yeah.
couldn't. There was no such thing as a microbrewery when
No,
we were.
no, no. But isn't maybe regional breweries the better thing? So we went from, we're talking about the right scale of doing things. But like I think the future is, and when you mentioned degrowth, that might be a new term for people. And I'm not saying all degrowth talk is co-opted by this group, but at Front Porch, I've reviewed several books on the degrowth movement. And a review I did that used a lot of Village on a book on scarcity was really received. I was trending in the degrowth movement in Europe for about a week and a half, and it was a lot of fun. One of the more fun things I've ever experienced. I was like the guy. But so you could Google scarcity, Front Porch Republic in my name, or degrowth, Front Porch Republic in my name. But there's also like Illich was saying, more so than Christopher Lasch was saying that we need to we need to discuss like a decreasing, gross domestic product. And you know how like we look at all these discourses are making sense now. That my son Aiden and I, we always talk about the Jordan Peterson phenomenon, that when you look at the world through charts, not what happened, you look at it's going to be over stereotyped, but like some guy in Africa who was making $0 an hour because he was a farmer like you are. And then they put him in a factory and they say he's making
What
$8
I make?
an hour, and they called it an 800% increase in wealth. No, they're missing the important stuff is that this guy had a life that was like walking amidst a garden. Now he's in a factory, which is a modern hellscape. And
Hmm.
this idea about degrowth, we need to bring that in because people can't, their minds are occupied territory when it comes to the economy. But we
Hmm.
need to talk about kind of landing some of this plane. It's just burning up too many bad things for the environment. It's you know, uh, and again, like I just think there's everything to love about this. Everything
Yeah.
and we got to attack the notion of scarcity at its roots. That's just a
Right.
multi-pronged thing that brings down modern medicine, brings down modern education, brings totally revolutionizes politics, and it revolutionizes economics more than anything, as Guido mentions.
Hmm.
There's plenty
And
to go around.
I think, I mean, I'm no economist, but I think we're at a place right now where there's a potential for that to happen
I agree.
more than I think at any time in my life.
Yeah.
Not that it will, but I think there's the potential is there in a stronger way than it has been a long time because of I mean, one thing I think with the downsizing of government, which means there's a downsizing of regulation and a downsizing of people in your business, right? Which is one of the things people like
I'm a fan.
farmers or whatever, that's the biggest hindrance to small businesses and you know local businesses is the government gets involved and you can't afford to do it anymore,
Mhm, mhm.
right?
And
Um,
this is happening across
but
Western Europe like crazy. Small
right,
producers of
and
anything
I
can't make it.
think right, and the other thing is they've been floating this idea about abolishing the income tax, right?
Mhm.
Which
I
is
haven't heard much about it.
you haven't heard about this. They've been floating this
I like
idea
it on
about it
principle. I just, yeah.
and supplementing that with maybe a higher sales tax
Uh-huh.
and tariffs,
Yeah.
which is anti-globalist in a way, right?
I'm not
Which
against
I'm
any of that necessarily. I like
no,
big thinking during
well,
these
that's the
times.
thing.
That's
We're not against that, but the thing is, people you would think that would be for that are like, oh, Trump's doing it, it's got to be that, right?
yeah.
Like Milbank,
Yeah.
you would think that there are things peace. They're talking about peace. We don't want peace from that guy.
People thought the machine was kind of working, right? Certain people that retired with nice incomes and things, they're very politically involved, and they thought the machine was humming rather smoothly. And it's kind of like the story of Dives and Lazarus, right? They needed to look around just a little bit more. But like literally every CNN and MSNBC viewer needs to read the story of Dives and Lazarus because like once you got off your patio or the pickleball court once you got out of the jacuzzi, once you got out of some of the health clinics and things like that, and you traveled a little bit, you're going to see that it just wasn't working, right? It just was not working. People were taking their lives at enormous numbers. The people we thought we were liberating by watering down gender were not liberated into individuality. They were commodified. Quite
Mhm.
often they were trafficked, and we the people who think everything Trump did or does is bad. I just don't think they've never really seen, and they were given such a script, right? If it was unless it was, I mean, skin color mattered about who was suffering and why, and this narrative was just so all encompassing. But I insist, one by one, only by calling them by name. Salvation, you've heard me say, is just rescuing from a crowd one by one. But it's got to be done in this crazy loving way, calling by name. And it's not even going after them. My friend John Gribwich would say we need a religious order of people who will just listen without partiality. Like if you put yourself to understand all is to forgive all, in some way you retired, it's sick, but you retired with a nice pension. You started watching TV, um, and you watched CNN because that was on. You were never introduced to this world of podcasts. Literally, you had nowhere outside the blogosphere. You know, um, it's to understand all is to forgive all. But we need a
Mhm.
mass movement, one by one, rescuing. What do you think? I mean, I don't even know what my proposal is, but unless we're using the gospel here, it's not going to end well. You said it. You think there's an opportunity. I'll go further. I know we're living in that moment. Are we going to make the machine, or are we going to make, or as James Tunney would say, or this guy Jason Horsley would say, the false mother or the true mother? Are we
Yeah.
moving towards Mary in the book of, say what you think.
Well, I think that's up to us then. But I think what I think we see going on right now, because you and I, we might want to break the machine, but there's no way we can break the machine, right? But we have people, it seems like anyway, trying to
Mhm.
break the machine.
Mhm.
But they have access to the levers of power to be able to break the machine at the source.
Mhm.
We can't do that even if we have these grassroots movements. That shit never works.
Okay, how
Um,
about how about this? How
and
about
like I
this?
said,
Like
sometimes if you
on behalf of the shit, possibly, the metaphors that I used to read about in Chronicles magazine, they saw all this coming. The metaphor of, breaking the machine is a good one. I agree. But how about the metaphor of like these things are parasitic? The national security state was parasitic. When a parasite consumes most of its hosts, it dies on its own, right? And the basic notion, we've used the term on this show a lot, egregore.
Mhm.
Stop feeding the egregores and they cease to exist. I want to say, I don't think saying this other shit, it's the gospel shit. I'm just speaking for myself. I don't think it's sufficient. That's all for the next moment, we got to endorse violence. And I'm
Well,
not
it's
saying
not.
you're saying
No, it's
this.
not.
I know you're not. I know.
I'm not saying that. What I am saying is
What
that,
are you saying doesn't work?
well, things as they have been going on forever, it doesn't
Agreed.
work.
I
At least it
totally
doesn't work
agree.
for us.
Yeah, no, it doesn't.
Um, but I think there's a corollary to what we're talking about with this small is beautiful. Basically, what we're talking about is small is beautiful,
We are.
and
Yeah,
we want to live in a country as big as it is
yeah.
that respects that idea of small is beautiful. Actually, that respects the Jeffersonian idea of the ideal American citizen is the yeoman farmer, right? I think
Yep,
there's a
yep,
lot to be said
yep.
for that.
There's
You
a truth
never,
to that
I don't
still.
think I
Yep.
ever see
Still,
anybody in
still.
this,
Yep.
this uh, called, communities talk about that at all. But I think that was Jefferson's idea,
And there's
the
an
yeoman farmer.
efficiency. You're a farmer. The idea of efficiency isn't premised on losing locality. Like some people think we probably need these massive amounts of food. And that's why people read my article on scarcity. Malthus, he got it wrong. Everybody thinks, just helping our listeners. The one thing I learned from this guy, Daniel Quinn, who wrote this book, Ishmael, which is kind of like a Siddhartha, Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance coming of
Mhm.
age novel. He just gives us a way of looking at the scarcity piece. If you had everybody in a Grand Union parking lot, Wegmans, Trader Joe's, carved them in, and you
Mhm.
threw in like 5 Big Macs a day, they'll breed to a certain size. And if you throw in 30,000 Big Macs a day, they're going to breed to producing. So in Malthus, short order, Malthus got us convinced in this arithmetical way of looking at this relationship that we need to be producing. We're always measuring,
Hmm.
population growth based on, and so beyond just the mathematical falsity of that way of looking at things, great agriculture for the land takes a knowledge of local sources, as you know.
And local conditions, yeah.
Right, right.
And which actually, where I was
Roman
going
farmers. Yeah.
is a corollary to that. It was interesting. We were talking about this localist kind of impulse that has an opportunity for something. A few weeks ago, I mean, it couldn't have been that long ago. JD Vance, did you hear when he did this
Following enough of it. Yeah.
the Ordo Amoris thing, the Order of Love?
Mhm.
When he was talking about first you take care of your family and then your neighborhood, and then you kind of circle out that way. He was straight up Thomas Aquinas,
It is. Yeah.
and the Pope called him out on it, suggesting that like some immigrant from, even an illegal immigrant from, say, Eritrea or wherever, is equal, should is we should have love for that person equal to what we have for our own children. You probably heard this, right?
I do. I
And
did. And again, at surface level
but I don't think,
crazy, there's a partial truth.
but what what the way I would interpret that is, I know that's the truth because that's how I live,
Right.
right? And I'm sorry that if you think I'm a bad Christian because um, I'm more concerned about the health and well-being of my children than people I don't know, right? I would
Yeah.
you can't do everything, right?
The
So,
nuance I
but
want
that's
to
where you
bring
have
up
to
is
start. But that's the same thing we're talking about. If you start small and circle out from there, you don't just start out here. And what happens if you start out here, the center falls apart.
I agree with 80. I mean, everything you're saying, like, and I hope you don't try to hear me splitting hairs, but in the theme of like these differences of like the true and false mother, the technostructure could still be built at this time. There's an opening. But these distinctions, like Christopher Lasch, for example, in his book, A Haven in a Heartless World, this came up in my class this week,
Right.
is when we talk about the family, sure, and I agree, and I really don't think this is hair splitting, and I beg our listeners' forgiveness. But like the claim made by Christopher Lasch is like we have these partisan divides, the Republicans and the neoconservatives. And when he wrote his seminal book, A Haven in a Heartless World, the neoconservatives loved it. They love this idea of the family, a haven in a heartless world. He was shocked nobody got the joke. A family, 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 because the modern neoconservative notion of the family, which Pope Francis, coming from South America, knows a larger notion of family that extends out, is welcome to bring in the other. So the neoconservatives created this notion of family, and you've got a large family, and you get this of like mom and dad and the numerical number of like 2.5 kids, the statistical average, and then these people go and just word cold, heartless jobs, heartless world. They were cold, heartless jobs, treating as they did in the Holocaust, people like Dots, just making money for somebody they don't know in these anonymous jobs. And they come back to their family, their family. And this neoconservative kind of USAID takeover of the Catholic right. Part of that critique, which I think is necessary at this time, so it doesn't become just a right phenomenon in the church pointing fingers at the left, like Bishop Barron pointing fingers at Jim Martin, is this notion that there's a way of talking about the US family that plays strongly into neoconservative aims. Does that make sense? So an extended family and its best
Yeah, that
level
was the
webs out into the world in a very natural, as you know it. So it's not like even a disagreement, but these things can be so politicized so quickly at this time.
right.
Yeah,
No, I think with the neocon upholding of the family, and
you
maybe
get it.
you
Yeah,
know, well, the same thing with Barack Obama, right? They all say stuff. It's rhetorically effective. Do they really mean it,
no,
right? And I mean, and and I'm not I'm looking for the thing to cure all things, the
yeah,
panacea. What all I'm saying is that uh, the conditions right now
mhm.
least that we're coming out of, are hostile to small,
They
are
are.
hostile to human flourishing. You know, when kids graduate from college with, $80,000 of debt or whatever it is, right?
Mhm, mhm.
Those things are all hostile to human flourishing. And think about this, with all the wasted money to bullshit programs from USAID, all of that could have paid for the all the college debt like this.
Yeah, yeah.
And with
At just
Ukraine, all
one
the money
level,
we
you're right.
gave to Ukraine. And that's
Mhm.
and
Yeah,
that's one of the things you think about, and that's when Trump says America first. It sounds like he's so heartless. But I think the point is that's his job to take care of his country, right? That's why he was
yeah,
elected. But also like a father, right? In in a family, if you're well, you're like I had to buy this furnace this week, right? So
mhm.
because my family was sick. And I had to buy it anyway, but they were sick, so that there was a little bit of immediacy to getting this furnace installed as quickly as possible since everybody had pneumonia. Um, that that's that kind of taking care of one's own takes precedence,
It does.
you
There's
know?
no doubt.
And there's nothing wrong with that.
Mhm.
And the thing is, and that's what I'm thinking, with if all that money that the US government wasted on Iraq, Libya, Afghanistan, Ukraine, all the bullshit at USAID. I mean, I'm sure there was some USAID stuff that was good, but it seems
Mhm.
like that was 90% bullshit.
Yep.
All that money could have paid everybody's student debt and then some.
Oh, truly so.
Yeah. And the thing is, this is what you had, or if you remember and the one thing I agreed with Biden about was canceling
Mhm.
college debt.
Yeah.
Whoa, there's a big rush of ice just falling off my house.
Oh,
It's
I thought it was
warming up.
stink bugs. I thought stink bugs were coming
It
in.
was crazy. It could have been.
Yeah.
Yeah. They're getting bigger. Yeah, so what I agree with Biden was canceling college debt made sense to me. But the thing is, the way it was turned, and especially the conservative media, was, oh yeah, so the people who have to work are going to pay for those people, right? We're paying for your education. But the thing is, if you look at the big picture of how much bullshit that was going to pay for all this weird stuff, like
Yeah.
studying trans frogs in Afghanistan or whatever it happened to be, you know, um, I mean,
Yeah.
we're already spending that money. We should at least take care of what's going on here. Because if they
Mhm.
did that, you know, and the thing is, college is so ridiculously expensive
Yeah.
because of all kinds of, the grant programs. So they raise the rates. I mean, it's insane. I mean, like I think back in the 70s, a college student could work a job over the summer and make enough money to pay off tuition, board, and books
Mhm.
on a summer job. Where have we
The
gone
whole thing
wrong?
is on debt. It's hard to imagine people can't look
Yeah.
around. And again, just looking outside, like how one generation just misunderstands that there's a whole generation that's looking outside and just saying it's really hard. Should I ever even think of having a baby? So many women who are not seeing men grow up because we've treated men like crap for so long, just saying,
Hmm.
in their teens, saying, I don't think I'll ever meet a guy, so I'm never going to put my hopes on having a baby. These are
Hmm.
realities in my life in just ministry. Um, just we're just shutting down the idea. I'm like 25 and I'm a young lady, and just meeting a guy, you know, it's just not going to happen. So um, you say it's not going to happen, and everybody's just trying to get by in this world. You don't need what Jesus wanted to do is soften people up. We need to share
Hmm.
and help one another. But to get by, you just have to harden yourself, your feelings about even wanting human things to fit into this world. Let me get a job at Twitter and give up the hope of having a husband and just watch TV. There's modern romance movies based on this. People who just given up on it, then they meet somebody. But yeah, it's just
Hmm.
people. I can't believe there's a whole class of people who don't know how shitty everything's become.
Oh no, no, no. because it happened incrementally over a long period of time,
Yeah.
right? So, yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I mean, but we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens.
Yeah.
But the
Mhm.
thing that, well, like I said, I mean, what really surprised me is, and then it's probably human nature, right? Is that people say they want something and they finally get it. They say, well, don't really want it.
Give the
You know,
example you're
I
thinking
know I
of right
wanted
now.
peace.
Yeah.
Well, I'm thinking
Yeah.
of Milbank and but it's a part of it's part of his social
So what's
class.
Milbank doing again? I got your text the other day, and I kind of know his thing is that like he's just so pro EU, and I just don't like those
Yeah,
institutions. I
I
would say
don't
like
get
who's going to
that
police it?
either.
So what was the thing that was so provocative this week? Remind me of what was so particularly
I'll see it's on
provocative.
my phone. I'll tell you what it was.
He's brilliant.
It did blow me. Uh, uh, uh,
I
Here it
think people
comes.
who move, Michael, you've been on your own plot of land, and so have I. I do think people who are stuck to a plot of land think differently than others. I really do. I really do. You know, these people, everybody who's just rootless, they start saying crazy stuff. Go ahead.
Oh, here's what he said. I could not believe it. I cannot help feeling a surge of pride that Britain is standing up to America for the first time since Suez. Just hope we can sustain this. And somebody said, I think you might want to speak to some Gen Zers first, that is, those of military age, before coming to any quick judgment. And here's what he answered. Of course I do. They'd be forced into line. The best of them are actually very impressive. Once again, religious and traditional. And over here, not simply deduced by Trump. The
Yeah.
unthinking remainder could be dragooned if necessary. We'll do them good.
It's
Oh my God.
yeah,
I didn't see that one coming.
dragooning.
Well, and plus, his son's not, is too old to be drafted, I think. I think his
Yeah.
son's about
Yeah.
28, 30.
The idea that
So
Britain's going to look for cachet just by like sending boots to the ground in Ukraine, and the big word is ironclad, right? This morning, I didn't see the
they're
news,
not going to
but
do
like you're a
shit. They
failed
won't do a
leader.
damn.
Yeah. They should chalk up failed
Won't do
leadership.
it.
The way to measure failed leadership is the number of times the person uses the word ironclad, right? Keir Starmer
Yeah,
is going to have an ironclad
and I
relationship with Ukraine. I love it.
and I did love that. I don't know if you caught that speech by JD Vance to the. I don't know if he was at the EU where he was, but he told them, "Listen, I'm not worried about Putin. I'm worried about you guys, where
Mhm.
you put grandmothers in jail praying silently 500 feet from an abortion clinic, or
Mhm.
you put people in jail for posting a mean tweet,
Yeah.
and whereas rapists get out of jail almost free." And I
He
think
said
he's
all
right.
this. Yeah. Yeah.
He said all that. Yeah.
Really interesting, just the medium is the message that I don't spend that much time on Twitter, but like JD Vance will just enter into a Twitter fray with journalists and things. I find it very interesting. You know, there's just so many things. Again, I want to bring up the names at this time, like people like Jeremy Scahill from the left, Glenn Greenwald has been famous for a while, Michael Tracy, definitely from the left, Matt Taibbi, Michael. I mean, that was just courageous what these people are doing. These good leftist
Yeah.
journalists who care about free speech and looking for the truth and holding power accountable. It's fun to look at
Hmm.
these goings on. If Trump scares you, look at these goings on through people. How about even like Chris Hedges? He hates Donald Trump, but he just says like Obama was bewitched by war. Just loved it. That this is an interesting
Yeah.
time. Please, we're asking you, don't just watch CNN, Fox, MSNBC. We're including Fox in there. Read good leftist
And-
journalists who distrust major media. Don't you agree, Michael?
well, that's what I've told. I mean, we've mentioned this before, but that
Yeah.
what excites me about this whole moment in history is that it's not just, I mean, you know, it's not a Republican Democrat thing anymore. I mean, they're
Yeah.
there, but who gives a shit about those guys? It's what's interesting, what's going on around this is this coalition of people from the left and the right. I mean,
Mhm.
Donald Trump used to be a Democrat, okay?
Yeah.
And but also you have Tulsi Gabbard used to be a Democrat. Bobby Kennedy he was a Democrat, but they wouldn't let him run for president.
Right.
Um, who else? I mean, there's Taibbi and Glenn Greenwald.
Or you
All
look
those
at the
people
opposite reaction of
coming
somebody like
together
Bernie
mostly over
Sanders.
the issue of free speech, right? Well,
I'm
Bernie
just saying the
Sanders, what a
opposite
disappointing
reaction.
that
Yeah.
guy is.
Yeah. It was exactly what you were saying. It's the opposite direction. You know,
Yeah.
people, the left is shifting, and somebody like Bernie Sanders being shown up as like, where did you ever, like, what did you ever stand for?
Yeah.
You know,
And Nicole
um,
Shanahan. So you have this kind of um really democratic, and I mean small d democratic, um coalition of people of from all walks of life,
yeah,
coming together, for over issues of free speech, human flourishing, which includes health, right?
yeah.
And it's to me that's kind of exciting.
How about you
At
speak?
least
How about
in
just
potential, it's exciting. We'll see how it works out, but I think,
yeah? But you
people
said
people don't want to
you're
see that.
no, but you're touched as I am about like if we were talking about a new coalition between the left and right. But this thing that I mentioned in my hometown of Penfield, New York, that Elon tweeted about is a movement that like left and right should speak on behalf of, but it just becomes a MAGA movement. That there is a movement of the left and right, but so much of this, I'm thinking again of like the US aid phenomenon that, can we keep this not just a MAGA movement, but the best. But I just see in the issues that I care about, and I'm just going to use the USAID one. It's becoming a MAGA movement against the left, and they're going to miss how the government. It's just an example. The government's bigger than the game you're playing, bros. It's bigger than the game you're playing. It's probably funding. It's already probably funding the journals you're using to run down USAID, right?
Yeah,
Just grow
I was
up, grow
surprised.
up. Yeah.
I don't know
If
if
it's
you
if
caught
it's
it.
just a right versus a left, it's not going to work. It's not going to work. And even Elon's
No.
getting into the right versus the left. Yeah. It's about
Yeah,
freedom.
and I think one of the things that's interesting there is that um and it's not, well, it's the media to some degree, it's
Mhm.
punditry to some degree, but it's also people don't want to. I saw this with the whole thing with the vaccines, with people not being willing to say they might cause harm or
Mhm.
something. No way, they're all safe, you know.
Yeah.
And they're still holding on. And people have compared them to like those Japanese soldiers in the jungle 40 years after the war
Yeah. Yeah.
ended,
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
still ready. Don't know the war is over. But but it was and so but that's the weird thing, is a lot of people can't acknowledge if something good happens.
Yeah.
Like when all this USAID stuff came out about all this funding, all this
Yeah.
propaganda, basically, not just in our country, but I think it was 25% of the BBC's budget was coming from the US taxpayer.
80% of
Isn't
all
that ins-
journals in Ukraine,
Yes, on
both
all
sides.
and lots of other things as well. But you would think, at least traditionally, traditional Democrats are lefties. As we know this, traditional Democrats and lefties were pro-labor, pro-working class, anti-war.
Yeah.
That's not what they are anymore.
Yeah.
They're just not, right? They're
Hmm.
pro-war all the time. And this start I don't know if it started with, but it certainly is a part of Obama's legacy.
Hmm.
Clinton was there to a degree, but Obama took it into hyperdrive. Um,
Yeah.
and and that's the thing. I think so many people have been conditioned to think in a kind of rut that they can't pull out of it, even with when presented evidence to the contrary.
But how do you think we can help with this, without running them down?
I don't know.
We came upon a tribe in the forest. They're really beautiful people, and they were just caught up in this superstitious belief. Um, we don't beat it out of them, you know. Um, it's probably just by kind of loving them into existence or something, and not even as victors, but probably as that's what I'm saying. The gospel becomes real again. These are the things they had to face. Everything during that time in the Roman Empire was a crowd phenomenon. Everything was a crowd phenomenon, such that even Peter, who was Jesus's friend, had to go with the crowd. It was that powerful. So without the
Right.
resurrection, the crowd phenomenon is that powerful. How do we, in Christos Yanaros, Ivan Illich, but I'm saying for Yanaros, I just can't say enough about this guy. Salvation is salvation from a crowd. The Zacchaeus story, you need to read it, the
Hmm.
Zacchaeus. But let's say that's what Jesus told Michael Martin. Well, I don't know. What you got to do is start saving people from crowds one at a time. Would we have post, billboards out there? What's the ecclesia was asked to do that let's presume there's something analogous to the time Jesus was born. The ecclesia was tasked with that mission. The persons in communion that was established by Jesus was tasked this mission of saving the church. So they welcomed
Mhm.
everybody by a name, a face, and a story. Like, hey, Barbara, using every, but we need a new telling of the gospel for today so we can go out in our daily things and contribute to the restitching of the world back together again, not in its, or when do we come out of this beat up mode and move into, we need to start making up pretty quick because people have like nuclear weapons and things.
Yeah. Um, I think our culture is convinced that if you have the right argument, you can convince people.
Yeah,
But Emerson said an argument convinces nobody.
no.
Um, so I don't think it's, I don't know. I mean, I don't really know other than to be about your father's business, right?
Yeah, yeah. But that's
When
the church. The mission
Mary
for
and
the
Joseph
church
go to
should
find
be,
Jesus, hey, did you not know I'd be about my father's business?
yeah,
What's the problem? Right?
yeah.
And I think that's all you got to do. You just chop wood and carry water and don't let yourself get sucked up into the vortex.
Yeah. How about as a community? I think you're right on that. But as a community, I would think the instantiation of the church at this time, if this conversation all makes sense, which I think it does, that should lead the church to saying we need to rescue people from this crowd phenomenon. They're buying into all this stuff, these narratives, and that
Well,
would be the mission for the church. I'm just using this in my own thinking
yeah.
lately to say, if the church was about her business, we'd be about this. And I think what's going on with this conclave will probably be about this. We're gonna see that the church doesn't really have much money. Does this keep on wanting to play the geopolitical game to pretend it's a big guy? Like the story Guido wants to tell is a compassionate one. If the church was a big player in the world, it was Europe. Then after the Reformation, it's coming to terms with that. It's just the church's own reality of herself is changing. Then you have the French Revolution. And we're pretty close
Mhm.
to that in one sense, the church saying who we are. So she kept on aligning herself, says Guido, trying to be important over here. And in World War II, keeping an ember in both fires, Germany's and the Allied parties, right? Until a very compromising stage because Germany was pretty Catholic. And if this was a thing that could possibly bring Catholicism, he shows how geopolitics was in the game. But there's some sympathy for this lady, the church, trying to come to terms with the world that she just doesn't know what to do with and now has no money. She might come out of this conclave if the US aid thing is discussed. Like where we get so much of our money, how do we pay our bills? A more humble, as Benedict says, a more humble church. Do you think there's any possibilities there or no? Because I would say that's what the
No.
church should be about, is rescuing people from crowds. I think there is a hope for that.
Well, I think that's what the church should be about that, but the church is a
Yeah.
crowd, and at least the ecclesia is a crowd, and I don't see any hope for those guys.
Uh-huh.
I just don't, because they're so, most of them, not all of them, but most of them are so removed from the from other than issuing.
Okay, but you're a poet. You're a poet. So G.K. Chesterton's right. The church dies and resurrects. This thing is dying. I want to grant you all that. It's going to
Yeah, but
look different. The papacy is going to look different. It's going to be a different musical register, possibly. But it's still, according to history, recognizably, when we look at the Catholic Church, as the church.
I
That's what I'm asking. Yeah.
but I think this is, I think this is the classic question. What do you mean by the church? And for
Yeah.
a lot of people, like Steve Skocek, is that his last name?
I've seen his name on Twitter. I don't know much
He
about him.
was he was the he was like a vehement Catholic apologist. He's friends with Cale Zeldin.
Okay.
But he lost his faith, and
Okay.
he still thinks about, when I ask him, what do you mean by the church? He goes, well, the guy's running the thing. So, well, that's not what the
Mhm.
church is. Yes, it is.
Yeah.
How can you say
Yeah.
it's not? Well, because that's not what it is. But the thing is, everybody acts like it is, and so do they.
But is there no relationship
Um,
between the thing? Like even if you used something of the skeletal structure, let's say we've given too much emphasis to the skeletal structure that is offered a rib cage to the ticking time bomb of the Gospels and things throughout history. It was always going to be conservative. It's old men. It moves slow. But do you think there's any Venn diagram overlap that structure will fray down to almost the bones again? It's there. It doesn't have much power. That's Guido's story. It's looking for power, it doesn't have it. Probably signed on, with the New World Order. Who cares?
well, I
But when
think
it
that's, and I
resurrects, it's going to
think
be recognizably the same. And liturgy
that
can
I
look
can't.
different. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't want to even guess. I don't
Yeah.
know.
Yeah, I
All
don't know either.
but I do know that I mean, it was patently obvious to me over the Francis papacy
Hmm.
that he was definitely in the pocket of the globalists, you know, through his promotion of all their projects, um, including the vaccine, but other things as well. The migrant crisis, you could say, is another
Yeah.
thing. He was behind all the projects that the World Health Organization and the World Economic Forum were behind. You know,
So
every one
you,
of their
Mike,
policies, he's totally with it.
if Guido wanted to convince you that so were the popes prior to him, would you have hoped your grandfather opted out of the Catholic Church? John Paul
Uh,
II, the bombing of Iraq, we just gave in here. We sold out to the New Order there. We got involved with Ebola in Africa. We got involved with these lies here or there. We got involved in banking. There's probably a murder of John Paul II. We were involved with bad. Um, yeah, I'm not, that's not a challenge to you. I don't know. It's a mystery working out in our time.
well, I mean, so when I think of the church,
Mhm.
I've been trying to think about it, but I'm as conditioned as the next guy.
Me too. Me too.
Um,
It's a great
I
conversation.
think of the Celtic Church, which was far away from
Yeah.
the interference of popes and cardinals, and kind of was operating sui juris, you know,
Hmm.
you know, kind of related to but not related to the superstructure.
Yeah.
So I think I like that idea. I don't know if it's going to happen. I don't know if it can happen.
But that's a good
But
example.
I
That's
like that
certainly
idea.
within what I'm looking for. That's not outside the fold of where I think we need to be thinking. Do we have any original templates for something that might come back? Or, and I think that's what we should be doing as Catholic intellectuals now. What might this look like? What's trying to push through? Have we seen models of this in the
Well,
past? Like I think the Celtic Church has a lot, that it's going to come something like that, where they were doing what they're doing. Then the structure comes in. Here's life, the Celtic Church. Then the structure comes in and just kind of like, oh, we'll say a
kills it.
mass for that. Yeah, we'll say a mass for that. For a while there was a nice fertilization, but yeah, eventually the structure takes it over. Then there's going to be new growth. Where's
Yep.
that new growth happening? Sure.
It's like that scene, and I ever see What About Bob?
Yeah, it's a great movie.
There's a scene where Bob's teaching the kid, the psychoanalyst kid, how to dive,
Yeah, it's a great
and
scene. It's on
he's
YouTube. Yeah.
telling he teach him, and his father, the dad had been trying to teach him. The kid's too afraid to dive, and Bob's
Mhm.
trying to teach him, and the kid's just about to dive. He's got up his courage. Then the psychoanalyst runs out of the house. I'll take it from there, Bob. Right? That's kind of
Uh-huh.
like that's what the hierarchy does. So
It
you got
is.
these grassroots movements, so if it's Dorothy Day or whomever, right? Where they're actually get people involved and they're
Yeah.
doing the gospel, right? There's a sacramental life going on, and all of a sudden those guys bust out of the house. I'll take over
Yeah.
from here, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
That's that's what usually happens.
And I,
That's
I
what
want to
usually
suggest
happens.
that's probably a story within all of us, the microcosm. We let the left brain overtake the right brain. Um,
Hmm.
that I don't know, like that's what I think we're working out the mystery of church in our time. I'm reading de Lubac, of course. I'm seminally influenced by Ivan Illich, who's, St. John Chrysostom said early, be careful of building hospitals. You're going to lose the virtue of hospitality, where all of a sudden the institutionalization of the message is the only thing, or the skeletal structure, the
Hmm.
ossified form is the only thing, and it takes dominance. But like
Hmm.
St. Paul, according to Illich, would say, you're going to be dealing with that struggle for eons,
Hmm.
and we're meant to learn something from it. But I think for me, only for me, we're entering into something new, a different relationship with like what we thought of as schools, hospitals, and churches. I think that,
Well,
that that's a historical thing that's collapsing in our time.
and I had as actually since I wrote Transfiguration in 2018, I think it was.
Yeah.
That's what I was
Yep.
banking on. But I think things are maybe getting to the place where the power structure is shrinking enough and getting potentially giving enough. Well, this is what happened in English during the English Civil War.
Yeah.
Um, the government was so preoccupied with the Civil War that the censors could not do, was not were not keeping up on top of things, and
Mhm.
so because of that, all this kind of crazy Protestant mysticism rose up all over the country, like the
That's what I'm
Philadelphia,
talking about. Yeah, that's what I'm talking
right?
about.
And actually led to Blake eventually,
That's
right?
what I'm
This
talking
kind of
about. Yeah.
antinomian impulse. And you would never think of Protestant mysticism as a thing now, but in the 17th century, it was just proliferating.
Yeah. Yeah.
Jakob Böhme in Germany.
Hmm.
Um, and we're at a potentially a moment like that right now. Well, the reason that stuff was allowed to flourish is because the power structure either was preoccupied or too broke to bother. And so they allow, these experimental structures had a way to at least try to flourish. Some succeeded, most didn't. But there was the opportunity there, and I think that's what I would hope. I mean, that's not a lot to hope for.
That's all I
That
was
this
pressing for.
moment,
I was pressing pretty hard, but I just think for me, I love you, brother. I just think you're a genius at that. You're so genius. You came up with it. I was trying to like get at you. And it's not to say like I'm watching everything going on in Washington with some of the same interest you are. But I think I'm looking for people who want to put their energy in that. Like you're a poet. Like that's a beautiful image for people. There's hope. Things can break out. All of a sudden it can, from the bottom up, there can be light, there's fissures and so forth. And I don't want to put
yeah.
words into your mouth, but I had never thought that. What a great historical reference. Um,
Well,
you know,
that's what I would
those,
hope for
yeah,
that. Okay.
yeah.
You
Mhm.
know, but you have to have enough freedom in the ecosystem to be able to do it,
Yeah. I think that's beautiful because I'm
or at
asking
least
you how,
neglect.
what does the Venn diagram look like? I'm as radical as you are. I still use the idea that if we were to talk about things we need, I mentioned it even this morning. We wouldn't be talking in church buildings. In order to have new thoughts, don't let the old influence the new. Um, that like we're looking for the new breaking through at our time, and I think poets like you are going to be. It's the era where we need the people who have those references at the ready to give people
Yeah.
hope. Otherwise, they're going to be led by politicians. They're going to be led by politicians because it's
Mhm.
easy. If I have one thing against Trump right now, and this blogger Charles Eisenstein, who's a voice for peace, you know, can we start turning down the anger? I can justify some of the border rhetoric, screaming at people, so it slows it down. He might have saved more lives by inducing fear, that like mean tweets are better than Nagasaki, so, I'm
Mhm.
with, yep, mean tweets are better than Nagasaki. But, uh, but using us versus them stuff too often after a while, it's always nemesis. It's gonna go against the person who uses that weapon because it's too easy. And it's the opposite of community. It's just using the crowds.
Mhm.
Mhm.
True.
Fascinating. What are you doing for the rest of today?
Uh, since Bonnie's sick still, I'm cooking. I've been
Okay.
doing a lot of cooking lately,
You?
and but I have to actually I told my son I would take him someplace. I think to the store. He wants to get something at the store. I don't know what it is, and I have to grab some bananas. Bonnie's only eating soft stuff right now.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So,
Poor
so
thing.
listeners, throw up a prayer for Bonnie.
Yeah, I will. I'll pray
He
for her.
needs to
Send
recover.
my love to her. What
Okay.
spring is starting to, in one sense, it's kind of like I'm here.
Yeah,
There's longer
I'm happy.
days.
Actually,
Yeah,
we hung
it's good.
our syrup our sap buckets the other day.
I'm gonna do some right after we hang up. We just have one big maple tree. I'm just gonna tap it. We just drink the maple water for now. My brother cooks
Good.
some, but it's just something to partake of what's going on in nature. It's just so
Yeah,
wonderful.
I love. I mean, I love. I mean, we don't never get that much syrup. I mean,
I
three
know,
a gallon,
but
but it's
sap
fun to
running. It's
do.
just what it's fun to do. Sap running to a tree and she offers you something. Unreal.
And it hasn't really. I mean, I went out earlier. It wasn't really running too much yet, but it's still only. Well, it might be doing it now. It's 36 degrees.
Okay, yeah,
So
but soon,
so that's
but soon.
my activity for this month.
All right. Well, you enjoy. I think next week we might have Guido on the ready. Tarathiki, if you're listening, send me an email, like whenever you want to come on. Um, and love to all. Thanks for listening to the Regeneration Podcast.